you're not going to own a business and not go through hard times.
Correct. Yeah.
They go together, right?
Yes, they do.
It's not great all the time. Things happen. You can't have survived this amount of time without being able to gauge risk. But I wonder if it's so innate that you don't realize you're doing it.
I'm impulsive. I'll try anything once.
Okay.
And I've always had the opinion that, if it doesn't work, we'll try something else.
Welcome to Beyond the Startup. Today I have Larry Carver with Carver Associates. He is both the founder and the president of Carver Associates. And today we're going to be talking about his journey all the way from founder, all the way back to when he started that company. And so today is going to be an amazing episode. Stay tuned. So Larry, I think what would be great is, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Larry Carver. I'm the owner and founder and president of Carver Associates. We do FF&E and OS&E, procurement and interior design for hotels.
Fantastic. And tell me, how did you get started in doing such a thing like that?
I was very lucky, actually, and I needed a job about 50 years ago, to be honest with you. And I guess my career started when I got out of college, and I needed a job. And coincidentally, a man by the name of Jack DeBoer was interviewing, and Jack DeBoer is the guy that ultimately invented the Residence Inn and the Candlewood Suites. And
Okay.
at that time, he was doing multifamily housing, and he was one of the biggest in the world, actually, next to a Japanese company. And so I went to work for him as a property manager, and did that for about a year. And they were doing a project in Atlanta, and I had been in Georgia when I was in the Army, and I loved the trees, so I wanted to get back to Georgia. So I finagled a transfer to Atlanta, and worked on that project, and actually bought the properties from the contractor, and then when that job was over, they wanted to send me back to Kansas, and I didn't want to go. So
I'm curious. I'm trying to get this straight in my head. So you went to college. Sounds like you were in the Army,
yeah,
right? Did you have any sense like you wanted to get into property management? Like, or did you just like, hey,
no,
rent's due on Tuesday, got to find a job?
that was about it. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I got out of school. I had a business degree, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I've always kind of puddled around in construction my whole life, so I thought I would look into that area. And Jack DeBoer was hiring, so yeah, I needed a job. That was about it.
Right. And so it sounds like, actually, you sound like a little bit like my son, Will, who has always been interested in real estate. And it's more of a hobby than anything else. And ironically, here in about 2 weeks, he's going to graduate High Point University with a business degree,
Oh, wow.
as well as a music degree. And so, it sounds like this was sort of your situation many years ago when you had just graduated and you were kind of looking to like how you're going to get that first job.
That's
Right.
exactly right. Yeah.
Right. And then you lucked into kind of finding a job that really kind of gave you that first step on the ladder, so to speak. Right.
Well, I think I have been incredibly lucky, and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time more than once, and that's what happened to me there with DeBoer, and then when I got back to Atlanta and finished the project there, once again I was very lucky. I, I didn't want to go back to Kansas, so I started looking around Atlanta, and coincidentally, Cushman was building Colony Square in Atlanta, and I interviewed for the job, and I was hired as administrator for their design department.
That was quite a big project.
Oh, it was a huge project, and I had no business being there. Actually, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was lucky I got hired as the administrator of their design division, a company called Design Atlanta, and um, once again I got very lucky. The man that hired me, a guy named Bill Hendrick, left Cushman and went to I think South Dakota or someplace to start a furniture company. So they made me director of design. I just happened to be there, and I had no idea what I was doing. But we had 6 designers, and we did all of the tenant improvements in Colony Square. We did all the office buildings and the retail. We didn't do the hotel, but we did all of the other interior finishes for him. And it was a great experience. As you mentioned, that was a unique project. It was the first multi-use project actually ever built in the United States. And it was the first $100 million mortgage by Prudential. So it was a great opportunity to see how that sort of thing is done.
So there were a lot of firsts there, right?
Yeah.
I have to ask, I almost have to challenge you on this, though, right? I've heard you now say 3 times in, gosh, it's a short conversation, how lucky you were. And I'm thinking to myself, I definitely get you got to be in the right place at the right time. And sometimes it's got nothing to do with you, right?
That's what happened to me, yeah.
But I'm also going to challenge you. I think you have to be prepared to be in the right place at the right time.
Well, you gotta have doors to knock on, and there were some really good doors to knock on back then. In the '70s, Atlanta was a boom town, and there was a lot of real estate development, and I just happened to be knocking on that door at the right time.
Prepared to knock on that door, right? And to have that door to knock on, right?
Well, I was willing to do anything, to be honest with you. Yeah. But uh, it was a great opportunity for me because Colony Square was the hot item in Atlanta, and all the big companies were moving there. So I really got to see firsthand how they operated and how they set themselves up and how they worked. And so it was just, I consider it a lucky break.
Yeah. So what do you think, if you kind of think back on that, what do you think that the intangibles were of that project, right? You're still young in your career. You've been in the right place at the right time. You've got this amazing opportunity, right? You probably met some amazing people. To your point, you got to see this thing from the inside,
Yeah.
right? So you've
Yeah.
got a lot of experience really pulled in there, and probably made some great relationships while you were there too. Tell me a little bit about how that project went and how you really feel like that project led to your next opportunity.
Oh, it most definitely did. When Colony Square was winding down, the man that ran the construction and the tenant improvements for Cushman was a man named Bill Reed, and he went to work. He went to work for John Portman and Associates. Uh, Portman was a very well-known developer, architect in Atlanta, and coincidentally, once again, very luckily for me, Portman was looking to get into the hotel business at that time, and they were starting up a company to do FF&E procurement, and they were looking for people to join that company, and I got I got hired, and I was hired by a guy named Lowell Goldman, and that was another lucky break because Lowell came to Portman from Hyatt. He worked for a company called Elsters, which was their technical services division, and he was a great mentor for me. He really taught me the business and taught me the value of dealing fairly with people and knowing what you're doing and all that sort of thing. And so I was once again very lucky.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you feel like that was your first real professional mentor-mentee relationship?
Yeah, actually, because the rest up until that point, I'd been faking it pretty much, to be honest.
So you're kind of on your own,
Yeah, I
just
I
the whole
really,
fake it till you make it thing, right?
pretty much, yeah. When I was hired by Cushman, I didn't even know how to read a blueprint, but I figured it out. And and then when under Lowell, I learned this very niche business, and he taught me well, and it was really a good experience. And then I got lucky again. Lowell left and went back to Hyatt. So they made me president of the company. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Do you think that was because you were sort of the understudy at the time and your mentor moves on and probably gave you some words of affirmation as he went out the door?
I would like to think that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was the logical choice, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you stay in touch with Lowell?
Yeah, we did. He had a newsletter that he put out for Hyatt, and I was at Portman for 8 years, and we did a lot of Hyatt Regency hotels, and we did a lot of what was then Western International. Now it's Westin hotels. But you after doing, we probably did 15 Hyatt Regencies, and you get to meet people, and this newsletter kept everybody in touch, and it was a good long-term relationship.
Awesome. And I'm curious if you kind of put yourself in that young person's seat today, right? A lot of people don't have mentors. And the business world, I think, is very different than it was in the 70s and the 80s, right? Where there was,
Yeah.
really more of this you go to one place and you stay and you become part of that company and you grow with that company. And the other side of that was that the company invested in you a little bit and, you know, provided you some mentorship opportunities and things like that, right? But in today's business world, I don't think that that is quite as prevalent as what it used to be, but I think that the lessons are still there. And I'd love to talk just a little bit about the value of having a mentor, particularly when you're young in your career like that.
Oh, it was very valuable, but more than that, really, just being with the Portman organization was a tremendous opportunity because they had um, they had all the disciplines in-house. They had architecture, engineering, interior design, development. He was a developer, and they were getting into the operation part of it also. So I got to see how all these pieces work together, and that was amazingly lucky. And Lowell was a great teacher. The only regret, well, he left too soon. Actually, I wish he'd left. He stayed. I wish he'd stayed another year or two. To be
Yeah,
honest with you.
yeah. Fantastic. And so as you continue to walk down this path, what happened next?
Well, I started my company in 1983, and uh, it was a scary thing to step out on your own, but the opportunities were there, and so I gave it a try. And our first job was an 1,100 room hotel in San Francisco, and uh,
That's a big job.
it was a big job, and but that's what we did at Portman. We did nothing but big convention hotels, 900 rooms, 1,000 rooms. So that was what I fashioned my company. I fashioned it after Portman, and so we started out concentrating on that kind of property, and um, shortly after I started my company, a lady that has become a very good friend of mine, a lady named Ronnie Bray, joined me, and we set up an office in Atlanta, and we got Canal Place in New Orleans, which is a Trust House 40 hotel. It was just a lucky time to be in the business because things were happening. A lot of hotels were being done, and we also started up an office in Boston, in
Okay.
Acton, actually, with uh, a lady named Tony Rook and Jillian Van Dresser. So uh, we just were very lucky. I think the first year we hit $100 million in spend was in 1987, and so we were just having a great time. And um, I think in about 1986, uh, we Japan Airlines came in with Nika hotels, and we did several of those. And the designer on the Nico Chicago and also the San Francisco hotel was a guy named Frank Mingus. We'd done a lot of work with Hirsch Bedner, with as Howard Hirsch at the time, and uh, and Frank was a great designer, and we became friends, and we started a design firm called Mingus Design in 1986, I think, 5 or 6. And Jillian Van Dresser joined that firm. She was a designer, And we had some very nice projects. We did the Hyatt Regency Albuquerque, Caesar's Palace. He did a couple of the Royal Viking ships, and it was a very nice company.
Yeah.
And
I have a question for you. If we think back to when you started your first company, right? Because up to this point, you had, kind of worked your way up through the ranks. You even got to be the president in a couple of places,
yeah,
but it wasn't yet your money. It wasn't yet your company, right?
right.
And so I'd love to hear, what was going through your mind as you're like, gee, I'm going to start my own company, right? We all know it's a little bit scary, right? But there's that thing, that push, that want, that need, that desire, that thing that makes you move from, I'm tired of being the big dog to I'm ready to be my own dog, right? What what was that for you?
I I don't work well in a corporate environment, to be honest. Um, I um, I was spending more time telling people what I was doing than I was spending doing it,
Mm,
and uh, and I thought I could do it better. I was kind of cocky at the time, and so uh, a couple of opportunities came along, and I decided to give it a try.
okay. And at the time when you started this new business, I mean, did you have any money? Did you finance everything? How'd you get started?
That's one thing about this business. It doesn't take a lot of money to get into it. I think I started it with $500 and a rented desk,
Okay.
and but all you need is a client and a computer, and so uh, Portman had back. This was in the '70s and no, in the '80s, early '80s, and the laptops were not well known. So Portman had this giant mainframe computer, and we had programmed a little system to handle our work. And when I started my company, I got the same programmer
Mm,
to do to build a system for us, and and that let us, I think, get out in front of the competition a little bit, and gave us a little credibility, and um, and plus we had we had two really nice projects, and that helped our credibility also.
yeah, yeah. So in your case, it sounds like you're the president of this company. You're like, hey, I can do better than this. I've got some ideas. I want to give it a shot, right?
Yeah,
And then what it sounds like to me is you had a couple of people, a couple of customers who were willing to give you your first break and say,
yeah,
hey, we'll go with you,
yeah,
right?
yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the Canal Place one, that was Ronnie Bray. She had that relationship, and but that's what this business is really, is relationships.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that because you said that probably 4 or 5 times in our conversation, right? I built a relationship. We had a relationship. We had a
Yeah,
customer. I had a mentor, right? These are all relationships. And
yeah,
I think it really just points to the value of these relationships that you build. And unfortunately, it takes time to build relationships, right? And so, when you're 18 years old, when you're 20-year old, you probably don't have these relationships. And I think that one of the things that we don't impress as much as maybe we should on our young people is the value of putting your places and spaces where you can start to build these relationships. Because even if this is, not something you can take advantage of or contribute to today, at some point, right, you're gonna find some synergies with somebody that is based on a relationship that you didn't think about at the time.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, it that is so true because um, especially in our business where you're dealing with multiple vendors, you're always going to need a favor down the road, and we've had occasion to call upon some of our vendors, some of our competitors actually, and work together to accomplish something, uh, and yeah, we couldn't do it without them.
Yeah. I can remember in my own career when I was, gosh, I must have been like 23, 24 years old, right? And at the time, I was working for a company that really serviced for Fortune 100 companies in the IT space. And I looked at all of the senior people above me, and they all had relationships that went back 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
And I can remember, even to this day, thinking, wow, it'd be so amazing. This guy knows everybody, and he's got all these different relationships with all of these, large companies. And, I'm 23, 24 years old. I don't know anybody, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I remember being enamored by that and being really curious about that. And, you know, here I am at 54 now, right? And I'm looking back on that and I'm thinking, about all the relationships that I have and all of the customers that we have, built over this, expansive time. And I know for us, we have a lot of customers that have been with us a decade. We have some customers now that have been with us for more than 2 decades. And really,
Yeah.
a customer is really just a relationship, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, I'm now in that sort of senior stage where I have these relationships, but I can remember in my early 20s thinking, gosh, I wonder, how did these people get all these relationships, right?
That was another thing I learned from Lowell Goldman, watching him deal with people that he'd had a relationship with for 30 years and how he dealt with them. And it was a very friendly relationship. And, you become friends and they want to help you and you want to help them. And so it just makes for a good life, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So, you've taken the first plunge, you've started your own business. You got 2 customers to come along with you and
Yeah.
help you in that endeavor. 1,100 rooms is not a small project to start with. I got to say that's pretty amazing. And you're kind of going down this path, and the big difference though is this time it's your money, right? This time you're on the hook for payroll and everything
Yeah.
else that goes with it, right? And so this is where the rubber hits the road, right?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we were rolling along in the 80s. It was great until the savings and loan debacle. And when President Reagan changed the taxes in 86, prior to that, the hotels were tax write off most of the, and then they started having to make money. And that's when our clients started to go bankrupt.
Oh,
I mean, we had 4 or 5 clients go bankrupt on us that at that time, 89 or 90, whatever it was. And so we had a very hard time getting through that, and we cut back to the bone and just hung on for dear life, and until finally in 1993 things started to pick back up. But yeah, it keeps you awake at night. It really
yeah.
does.
There's an interesting thoughts around that. I'm listening to you as you're explaining that. And the number one thought I'm thinking about is you're not going to own a business and not go through hard times.
Correct. Yeah.
They go together, right?
Yes, they
It's
do.
not it's
Yeah.
not it's not great all the time. Things happen, and it's not necessarily because you did anything, right? The changing of the tax codes, you had
Yeah.
nothing to do with that, right? But all of a sudden, your customers are having a hard time, and if they're going bankrupt, you might get pulled into the middle of that, right?
It was scary. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you think about, the strategy of how do you take a step back, right? And I know for me, one of the things that I have found through my career, and I'm very cognizant about it even today, is when something happens, at the time that you realize something is happening, you've probably got 10 different options, right? But the problem is that none of us like any of those 10 options.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so what we do is we hang on a little longer.
Mhm.
And what we find very shortly is we don't have 10 options anymore. We have 8 options, 6 options, 3 options. And inevitably, what happens is you're down to that one option where now you don't have a choice. That's the option you're taking. But when you think about that after it's all said and done, what you realize is that last option was the one you would not have wanted to take when you had the other 9 on the table, right? And so,
Yeah, yeah.
really being thoughtful about realizing early that we're gonna have to do something, and you're gonna have to be thoughtful about which of these 10 you can exercise today, and knowing that every delay is gonna cost you options down the road, right? And I think anybody who's gone down that cycle,
Yeah, at that point in time, there was nothing going on, and that was, we used to get, we traveled all the time, and I used to get multiple tickets on Eastern and Delta back. You could fly anywhere in their system, and I remember I had a ticket in my briefcase for a year. There was no place to go because nobody was doing anything. So it was tough, and I think luckily I had a friend of mine that we had, I think, like 2 jobs or something like that. There was enough barely to keep the lights on, but we just hunkered down and and stayed in it until things picked up again.
yeah. And so I'm curious, I'm assuming during this time you probably had to retrain some staff and really pull in a little bit,
At that
right?
time, we were down to 3 people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And where were you when you started?
we probably 15 to 14 or 15, yeah, in the 3 offices. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So you had 14 or 15 people and to retract down to 3 people,
yeah.
right? But that work,
Well,
it doesn't all go away,
it allowed us to get through it. Yeah,
right?
that
Yeah,
was about it.
and that's what it is, right? You're
Yeah,
trying to figure out how you're gonna make it through the other side, right?
exactly. Yeah.
And I don't know what your experience is, but in my experience, every time something bad happens, it forces us to get stronger. It forces us to get better. It forces us to sharpen our blade. And inevitably, I feel like it was that thing that ended up propelling us to the next level, even though it was really uncomfortable at the time.
Yeah, it was definitely uncomfortable, but we we got lucky again. We were able to capture the Shangri-La Taipei in Taiwan, and we had done some work with when I was with Portman in Singapore, and so we had a few relationships, and we were able to capture that job, and frankly, that's the one that pulled us out of the downward spiral, and also in 1993, we went to Korea. I met a guy, a man named Chang Ko. He was an artist and worked for an art company in Los Angeles, and he had been involved in the development of Koreatown in L.A. And uh, Korea had just changed their laws where they could hire outside consultants. Prior to that, you had to be Korean. So Chang wanted to establish a business in Seoul. So we formed a partnership and set up a business in Seoul, and had some very nice jobs during that decade. We did the Westin Chosin, we did the Marriott, we did a couple of resorts. It was a good time. But and our business kind of ebbs and flows. It's peaks and valleys. And the '90s, it was on an upward swing, and and we were able to strengthen our group, and we were able to get some nice projects, not only in Korea but also we uh, we had moved our office from San Francisco to Las Vegas, and we got the Tropicana in Las Vegas, and and casinos are a whole different world, uh, but we got established in that market, and it worked out okay.
Yeah. So it's fascinating to me how you've not only done projects here in the United States, but now we're talking about projects in Korea, we're talking about projects in Asia, all over the place. How is the cultural component of now going from being almost an American business to an international business?
It really doesn't matter where the property is located. The processes are the same, and um, and I had, as I mentioned, we'd done some stuff with Portman over there, and we learned that really the uh, the only problems that you're liable to incur that are unique are logistics, of course, and sometimes the currency, the finance. But it's that the process of actually doing the job are the same. I've always felt like we could do a hotel anywhere on the planet, as long as we had the financing and we knew how to get the stuff there. And
So did you ever run into like either language issues or maybe cultural um, differences, things like that?
that was something that was kind of surprising. We'd never had any cultural issues at all. Virtually everybody we worked with, I mean, whether it was in Asia or the Middle East or India, uh, the people there are just like us. I mean, they just want to have a good life and a job and take care of their kids and that sort of thing. We never had any cultural issues. And working with Chang in Korea and we had a partner in the Middle East, a guy by the name of Iqbal, Muhammad Iqbal, um, and we became friends. And and their children were doctors and lawyers, and they're just normal people.
Yeah. So people are people world over.
Yeah, they really are. At least that's my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. And so as we kind of continue down your story, right? We've now had our first business. We've had our first success. We've had our first tragedy. Right? It's like a love story, right?
Yeah, really.
We've had
Yeah.
we've had our first tragedy. We've recovered, right? And we're on to the races. So I'm curious, Larry. You got to tell me what happened next.
Well, actually, I missed one. We got into the Middle East. Well, no, actually, in the year 2000, uh, we got into the turnkey business. Up to that point, we had always worked on a fee for services model. And there was a company in South Georgia, a company called Allegiant, that catered to smaller hotels, Holiday Inns, and that kind of thing. And they had a different model. They would buy the product and mark it up and resell it. And they were a very nice company. They were doing about $230 million a year, I think.
Yeah.
And they were bought out by by the Japanese. The Japanese people, Japan company bought them, and they were basically a sales company. And the Japanese thought that the salesmen were making too much money, so they cut their commissions drastically and put them on salary, and all the salesmen left like rats from a sinking ship. And so we hired 13 of them.
Wow.
And we set up an office in Griffin, Georgia, because that's where they were all from. And we got into the design business, interior design business, and we started up a turnkey division, uh, basically concentrating on smaller hotels. And the budgets were relatively small. They were between half a million and $2 million. Uh, but um, but but we would take title to the product, which means we were on the hook for the whole thing. And it was a little scary. It took us about 7 years before we made a profit at that
Wow.
business, but it after that it was very lucrative. It's a good business.
Yeah. So one of the things that strikes me as I hear you talking is just the ability to evaluate, quantify risk, right? Because now you've gone into this new business. You had some foresight. You're like, hey, sinking ship. Some people are going to be like, sinking ship, go away. I don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
But you're like, hey, opportunity, right? Because these guys were printing money over there. They were doing a fantastic
They were doing great.
job,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you saw that opportunity, and it seems like you reached out with both hands, and you hired 13 of these guys. 13's not a small number of people.
No, it wasn't, and actually, about 11 of them didn't work out. But it's it still was it was a good move for us. And after we got through the initial um, shock it turned out to be a good decision.
Great decision. And so talk to me a little bit about your experience and maybe some advice that you would give somebody in their business when they're looking at risk. How do they know if this is a risk worth taking or a risk worth walking away from? Or like, what advice would you share?
I'm probably not a good person to give advice on that. I I'm impulsive. I'll try anything once,
Okay.
and I've always had the opinion that if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. But uh, yeah, I mean, I got into the art business. We had an art gallery in Sausalito in the late '80s, and that was uh, just seemed like a fun thing to do. And we had that for about 6 years. And Frank Mingus, we provided art for some of his hotels, and it worked out. It worked out okay. Um, but uh, so if somebody's asking me I don't. That's my problem. I don't gauge risk so much. We never really made any money at the art gallery, but we about broke even at the end. But we had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Do you think it's you can't you can't have survived this amount of time without being able to gauge risk? But I wonder if it's so innate that you don't realize you're doing it, right? And maybe the answer isn't that you reach out and study it and decide whether you're going to do it or not. Because what I'm hearing from you is like, hey, we'll try anything once.
Yeah.
But I think that there has to be some sense of, hey, but we'll also know when to cut it off.
Well, in the art gallery business, yeah, we knew there wasn't any future there, so we did shut it down. Yeah. Um, I had a freight company also in the mid '80s. We started a logistics company called Transport Control, but I wouldn't let them make a profit because we were a fiduciary. We were agent only for the clients, and I wouldn't let them book freight that was more expensive than the vendor could give us. So that lasted about 2.5 years, something like that. But we shut it down because we had a conflict of interest, actually.
Yeah.
So sometimes you make a move that doesn't work out.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all going to do that, right?
Uh,
I'm also curious as I'm thinking my way through your story, you're trying lots of different things and you're trying to figure out, what's the thing that's going to work out, right? And, like we talked about, sometimes you're going to find some risks along the way. Sometimes you're going to pull those in. Sometimes you're going to be oblivious to them, right? But as you're doing that, I know for me personally, was the education about money, right? And that is when I was young and I was an engineer, right? So I started off as an engineer, right? If you had broken things, I knew how to fix broken things, right? But I didn't know anything about sales. I didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't know anything about finances. I didn't come from a, a family that was particularly entrepreneurial.
Mm.
My wife, her parents, one was an auto mechanic, one was a secretary, and so we didn't
Yeah.
have a sphere of influence that we could pull on, right? And if I look and I think about my own journey, one of the things that you figure out is a little bit about money, a little bit about how it works, a little bit about, how to be smart with how you buy things and how you pay for things and, taxes and everything else that goes along with it, right? But I didn't know any of these things when we started,
I didn't either.
right?
I'm not sure I still do, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, no, I finance is my worst subject, actually. Um, uh, I liked. We were buyers. That's what we did. We spent. Oh gosh, but our we had several years where we spent $350 million of other people's money. But we had a process. And as long as you went through the process and uh, you got competitive bids and you presented them properly and you vetted the vendor and all of that sort of thing, it was. It was a rather foolproof system, theoretically. Um, but as far as um, having knowledge about the finances, I was not very good at that,
Okay, that's fair.
to be honest with you.
So did you find somebody to fill that role for you?
Yeah, I had we had we had a CPA that started with me when I started my company, and she was with us for, oh gosh, 20 years, and then we got another one, and I pretty much left the accounting to them, uh, and we just did the work, and that was what we concentrated on, was doing the work and doing it as well as we could, as good as we could.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lesson there too, right? Not all of us can be good at everything because we're humans, right? There are things that we're just innately not good at. And for
Yeah,
me, it's paperwork, right? If you anything that requires lots of paper, that's not for me, right?
yeah,
I'm just not that guy, right? And so one of the lessons that I've learned is to really try to be cognizant about what are those things I'm just not naturally gifted at, and then finding someone who enjoys it. And I think one of the realizations that I had in my journey was everything I don't like, there's somebody
there's
out there
somebody
who
who will do it.
lives
Yeah,
for it. They love
yeah,
it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But it's just on me, that's all,
No,
right?
yeah, that
And
I'm the same way.
and
Yeah,
so you got to find that person who's like,
yeah,
paperwork. Oh,
yeah,
I love it. How much you got, right?
yeah.
And I'm like, I got all you need. How much you need, right? And I think that that's one of those lessons that you learn too is, don't try to be good at something that you're not because you're human. There's just going to be things you're just not good at, but there are people who love doing it.
Yeah, that's true, especially in our turnkey business. Design was a big part of it, and I don't know a thing about design, but we found some very good designers, and they filled that role and did a good job at it, and it worked out well for us. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty awesome. And so now it sounds like in our story we're expanding out into other places. Some of these places, Larry, I got to tell you, they're unexpected places, right?
Yeah.
Now we're into freight companies and all kinds of really
Well,
we
it's
need.
all a part of our business.
Yeah.
When we had that freight company, it helped us a lot. It helped us do our work, but the business model didn't work,
Yeah.
and so we had to close it down. But uh, e- everything that we did was a part of what was needed to open a hotel.
Yeah. Yeah. And so where does that bring you next? What happened after this?
Well, of course, 2001 happened,
Mhm.
and that stopped everything. And we during the savings and loan deal, we got rid of everybody pretty much, and we didn't have the staff when things picked up again. So at 2001, we decided we were going to try to keep our people, and when we did, we kept them through all of that, and it was very painful, but it was good because when business picked up, as it inevitably would, we had the staff to get in front of the line and actually do some good work during that time. And we did great until the financial crisis of 2008. Then it was the same thing all over again, and uh, that was a very hard time. And we just barely made it through it. And through 2009, 10, 11 were horrible. And then 2012 started to pick up a little bit. And then in 2013, we had a great run between 2012 and 2019,
Mm.
and that's when we got into the Middle East. Um, we were approached by a company in Saudi Arabia called Sleep High Mattress Company. It's a public company, and they wanted uh, to get into the hotel business, and so we joined them. We formed a partnership with them, and we went over to, to there, and we did that for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and a year and a half, and then they were bought out. the new owner came in and bought Sleep High, and they didn't want to be in that business anymore. So we said, okay, well, we'll shake hands and leave. And so there we were. We were into Saudi Arabia about a year and a half. We didn't know what we were doing, but we had a booth at the Dubai Hotel Show, and uh, we had made a decision prior to the show. We said, okay, if we don't have a project by September, we're out of here. We're going to go back home. And during the show, a guy by the name of Muhammad Iqbal came up to the booth, and a guy named James DeBoer was manning the booth for us. And he asked what we did and how we did it, and he explained it. And he said, well, I want to go to Atlanta. So sure, come on. And so he came, and he had this grand vision of wanting to start a business in the Middle East, Dubai and Saudi Arabia, doing what we do. And so once again, I'm impulsive. Sure, why not? And so we formed a partnership, and uh, he hired like 20 people, and we went all over the Middle East. We went in virtually every country over there, and we were we were doing well, and until I think it was 2019, and then COVID happened. Yeah, there you go again. So we were on our way to we on a trip to we were going to go to London, and then to Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and India. We had an office in India, and uh, no sooner did we land in London than Trump closed the airport. COVID happened, and so we barely got out of there. So and we were on our way to sign a deal for 11 hotels. It was really, really this was going to be the big deal. But COVID just totally stopped everything again. And so we once again barely made it through, and it was a very hard time. But once things started to loosen up, um, in 2023, or about 2023 and 24, um, uh, it exploded actually, because the brands had put the stop to the franchisees. They wouldn't let them renovate their hotels. And then when everything started loosening up, they they made them get out there, and so the business was crazy. And so we went through 23 and 4 and 5, and here we are.
Wow. That's quite an amazing story, right?
It was an adventure, yeah.
You hit, gosh, 4 or 5 times where you could have just said, "Hey, I'm going to go work for somewhere else," or "I'm done," or this one's going to get us, right? And in each of those cases, what I saw was perseverance. What I saw was, how are we going to get through this, right? And
Well, yeah, but also I looked at the company as um, my livelihood, and we did everything we could do to keep the company alive, because we knew it was going to get better. If we could get through this,
sure,
it's going to get better, and it can be a really good business. So we just hung in there.
yeah, and have done a really good job. Um, you know, not only in what I see of you guys today, but you know, this has been quite educational for me, just to understanding your past and your story arc. And, you know, whenever I sit down with an entrepreneur and you listen to their story and you kind of listen to all of the crazy things that they've gone through, right? It's
Yeah.
gosh, so many of us could have given up, right? And I I say I say to people who ask me all the time, and I think about my own story, and I've been doing this now for about 35 years, right? And I think about my own story, and I ask myself this one simple question, and that is, if I knew what I knew now today,
Yeah.
would I do it all over again? And I think for the average person, they'd be like, oh, heck yeah, because look where you are now, right? But, when you really think about that, that's a tougher question than you might think.
Yeah, but I once again don't work well in a corporate world, and I just like being my own boss. That was uh, what kept me going. I think, because I couldn't imagine going to work for somebody else.
Yeah. That's I'm right there with you. I have a hard time with the corporate structure and the corporate politics.
Yeah,
That's not for me, right?
yeah, yeah,
But gosh, I think about the birthdays that I missed. I think about the trips that I were on. I think about
yeah. It's
the
just,
the times where we got paid last, right?
oh yeah, always.
And you think
Yeah,
about all these different things, and at some point you wonder, like, gee, gosh, you know, to have that stable paycheck, right? And have someone else make these decisions. Um, there is some attraction to that at some level, right? Uh, and unfortunately, then the next new shiny things come along, and you're like, oh yeah, but we can make this work, right?
yeah. I mean, it it's a challenge, and uh, you just once again, I couldn't go to work for somebody else. That was just off the charts. I couldn't even think about that.
Awesome. So I'd love for you to spend just a second thinking about, that young 20 something person today who's thinking about starting a business. Maybe that person who's in the middle of their 2008 crisis today,
Mhm.
right? And they're thinking about, gee, gosh, are we going to make this through it, right? And I'd love to hear what would be some advice that maybe you would give to these younger generation.
Find something you like. I mean, if you gotta you gotta like what you're doing, and uh, I uh, I really feel lucky that I got into the hospitality industry because it is a very friendly industry. It's not a cutthroat business like retail or manufacturing or anything like that, where you'll kill your neighbor for a nickel. I mean, we're good friends with all of our competitors, and we go on vacation together. We compare notes. It's a very nice business to be in. So actually, find something you like is would be my advice. And if I didn't like it, then I certainly would have gotten out of it. But it's a good community. The designers and architects, a lot of talented people, and I like being around talented people. And so the idea is how do we make it work rather than look for something else. That was kind of how I looked at it.
Yeah, fantastic. Larry, I really appreciate you joining us and sharing all of your wisdom. And, I'm sure that there's somebody out there today that can really, they're living your story, right?
Yeah.
Or because, you know, the reality of it is we all own these businesses. We're all trying to figure out, what are we doing? None of us know what we're doing. I mean, we're all trying to figure it out. And, I think that, as we all are going through our careers, to have somebody, to kind of look back and to give back a little bit and to think about that, I really appreciate you joining us and doing that for us.
Oh, this is great. I really appreciate it because I probably in our company I'm the one that calls you the most because I'm the least technically a proficient person in our group, and you guys have kept us afloat for a long time, and I'm grateful for that.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.